He was a phenomenal friend who used every talent he was given in the service of children and their families. Through his leadership and legacy, he continues to impact people of all ages. He was an educator, a composer, a television treasure, and a wonderful neighbor.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine?
Behind the trolley, the sneakers, and the puppets, Fred Rogers changed children's television forever. Fred McFeeley Rogers was born in Notre, Pennsylvania on March 20th, 1928.
And so I graduated from Rollins in '51 with a Bachelor of Music degree. But I went home my senior year for a vacation in Latrobe, and I saw this new thing called television. And I saw people throwing pies in each other's faces. And I thought, this could be a wonderful tool for education. Why is it being used this way? And so I said to my parents, you know, I don't think I'll go to seminary right away. I think maybe I'll go into television. And they said, well, but you've never even seen it. And I said, well, I've seen enough of it here.
After college, Fred Rogers became the floor manager in the fledgling industry of television at the National Broadcasting Company in New York City, and married his college sweetheart, Sarah Joanne Bird.
He left NBC in 1953 and took a job in Pittsburgh at WQED, a forerunner of the modern PBS. He wrote, composed songs, and developed puppets, including Daniel Tiger, all behind the scenes for an hour-long show, The Children's Corner. This would begin children's educational television.
Canadian Broadcasting Corporation invited Mr. Rogers to Toronto to host a children's program where he had to appear in front of the camera, talking directly to children.
In 1966, he returned to WQED, which had acquired the Canadian Children's Show and expanded it to create Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for the U.S. He used his studies in early childhood development to speak to children about a theme based on their emotions and experiences. An imaginary trolley ride carried viewers from real life to fantasy, where puppets provided drama and a cast offered perspective on the subject.
Fred Rogers realized that tragic news could be confusing for a child and encouraged parents to talk with their children about their feelings.
There had been too many things. The country was in deep grief. I mean, President Kennedy had been killed, then Martin Luther King was killed, and then Robert Kennedy. And I said, I've got to talk to the families.
In 1969, the funding for PBS was in jeopardy. President Richard Nixon wanted to cut the $20 million grant in half due to all the spending during the Vietnam War. On May 1st, Rogers spoke to the U.S. Senate to continue to fund educational programming.
All right, Rogers, you got the floor.
I'm very much concerned, as I know you are, about what's being delivered to our children in this country. This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned the $20 million.
Honored by his colleagues for outstanding service to children and their families with a Lifetime Achievement Emmy, Rogers' acceptance speech brought only silence, literally.
So many people have helped me to come to this night. Some of you are here, some are far away, some are even in heaven. All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. Would you just take, along with me, 10 seconds to think of the people who have helped you become who you are? 10 seconds of silence. I'll watch the time. Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel they've made. You know, they're the kind of people television does well to offer our world.
Fred Rogers received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor, in 2002.
Fred Rogers has proven that television can soothe the soul and nurture the spirit and teach the very young.
Fred Rogers continued to write books for children and parents into his retirement. He went back to work briefly after the 9/11 terrorist attacks to record a public service announcement for PBS, guiding parents on how to comfort their children.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was the longest-running children's show in PBS history. The last original show aired in August 2001.
When you outgrow Fred Rogers as a kid and you say, I don't want to watch that anymore, something has been lost. And it's not innocence, it's a kind of spirituality that is amazing. And he's really one of the towering figures of the 20th century. He's really an amazingly deep, deep human being.
Fred McFeeley Rogers died from stomach cancer on February 27, 2003. He was 74.
Following Fred Rogers' death, the U.S. House of Representatives passed Resolution 111 honoring Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers' example and his deep ideas, stated simply, inspire over time and culture.
The official archives of Mr. Rogers' work are at the Fred Rogers Center in Notre, Pennsylvania.
In the Fred Rogers archive, we are continuing his legacy by making available to researchers Fred Rogers' correspondence, his television scripts, his personal writings, his notes.
The center also houses Incubator 143 for Dr. Lee and the Fred Rogers Scholars, where they work on ways to continue Mr. Rogers' work.
I think Fred's greatest legacy for me and for some of the work that we're doing here at the center is not any one lesson. I think he so inspired and compelled us to want to ask the question, what would Fred Rogers do in present time? Our work now spans, urban neighborhoods, little child care centers, to classrooms, to after-school programs and public housing projects, and I sometimes travel to orphanages in China.
Fred Rogers' leadership and legacy are being perpetuated through the Fred Rogers Company in Pittsburgh by producing Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
I think that Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood would be a show that Fred would be very pleased with.
Mr. Rogers' legacy has transcended outside of Latrobe and even the greater Pittsburgh area, and his materials can be found in multiple parts of the world.
But if you go to China and say Fred Rogers, nobody would know who that is. So there you really get a test of whether the ideas can travel. Not him, the personality, but the ideas behind the personality. He has such a unique ability to take the most profound ideas about human beings and put it in the simplest possible words, right? In a way that it can be all the way in China, in a little village, and people, it moved people to tears. And I think that's the universality of the legacy of Fred's work.
I'd just like to be remembered for being a compassionate human being who happened to be fortunate enough to be born at a time when there was this fabulous thing called television that could allow me to use all the talents that I'd been given.
Fred Rogers was an amazing and a creative person who continues to have a lasting effect on lots of people's lives. But the more you learn about Fred, the clearer it becomes. He was truly the special one, a really wonderful neighbor.
You'll find many ways to say I love you. You'll find many ways to understand what love is. Many ways, many ways, many ways to say